This moment right here, it blew up online. And honestly, you can feel the tension.
If she hasn't eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she doesn't know good and evil. So how does she know that it's evil if she hadn't yet eaten from the knowledge of good and evil?
A naturalistic explanation can explain, suffering before, suffering after, but you've been very careful to make it clear that there's no moral ramifications to this at all. It seems most people are pretty aware that there are moral ramifications. So if your worldview does not have a way of making sense or moral intuitions about suffering, even animal suffering, it's not an adequate worldview.
I just sat with one of the greatest Christian apologists alive, Greg Koukl from Stand to Reason, and I had to ask him about that moment. What did we not see in that interview? What was it like facing off against Alex O'Connor? We also talked about how to navigate politics and faith as Christians, and how to speak truth to a hostile culture without becoming a jerk in the process. If you've ever wondered how to stand firm in truth and still reflect Christ, this is the conversation you don't want to miss. My name is Nate Sala, and this is Wise Disciple. Let's get into it. So I watched Diary of a CEO podcast.
Okay.
And it was 3 hours of very polished. The cameras all look great.
Yeah.
The conversation, everything. I realized that there were pieces that were edited. And so my first question to you is, if you can just help us, take us into the scene. What did we not see that was on camera? And how was that interaction with those three gentlemen?
Yeah. The camera started rolling at 11 a.m. and we didn't get out until 4:15. That's when it stopped. So it's 5.25 hours. It was 3:23 or something, final edition. And so there was an hour and a half left on the floor.
Yeah.
So when you have this much time to talk about things, you try to strategize a whole approach. The issue was meaning and purpose. Why are there so many people that are not experiencing meaning and purpose? And so you have an atheist, you have a Christian theist, and then you have, I'm trying to figure out the category for Dr. K. Well, he was a Harvard medical psychoanalyst of some sort. I mean, he's a medical doctor and a psychiatrist.
Right.
I don't mean some sort like to disparage it. I'm just saying, trying to put it all together. But he also spent 10 years in an ashram in India or something, studying to be a Buddhist monk. And so his approach was very clinical and Eastern religious spiritual kind of mixed in. It was an eclectic mix of that.
I noticed.
So, and then I'm giving the Christian worldview. So I'm just laying a foundation here for our discussion because when I'm thinking about what I'm going to contribute, I'm thinking, of course, my tactical maneuvering in particulars, but I have to think of a strategy. How do I want to approach this? And so that's what I was laying the foundation for, Nate, in the beginning. And that was the host, Stephen Bartlett. He read off some statistics about young people in Britain. 90% feel aimless, no purpose, no meaning in their life, and so why is that? Now, I understand why that is. It's because we were made with meaning for purpose, and if we cut ourselves away from our mooring, then we're adrift.
Yeah,
and all these people are cut away from their mooring. And they're adrift.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mentioned that as we opened up. And I said that it was Augustine who said, Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. It's a great line because it's well put. It's got a nice euphonia, rhythmic, but it's so profound.
Yeah.
And I was able to use that to try to identify my position in this whole discussion. Why are we here? We are here because our hearts are restless, and so are the hearts of multitudes.
Yeah.
And we're discussing why are we restless? And I think, though three of us had very particular points of view, Stephen didn't. He was agnostic about a lot of it. He's trying to find his way.
Yeah.
Massively successful in his field for a young man especially. Yet at the same time, he is doing this event not just for others, but for himself. And so I'm thinking about that, and I want to put this in perspective. We're here because there is an answer. If there wasn't a meaningful answer to the questions we're asking, I don't think we'd be looking for it. We got 3 cats in our house. I guarantee they're not trying to figure out the meaning of their life and then work out their programs after that.
Yeah.
So that was the opening salvo, so to speak, to try to help me frame the rest of the discussion, at least from my perspective. And there's another really important factor here that I did get to sooner or later, but none of that got included. The citation from Augustine, which I thought was so vital to understanding the way I approach this whole issue. I'm not complaining. There were a lot of good things that were in there. I didn't feel I was kind of misdealt, as it were, in the final cut.
Yeah.
You got to cut out an hour and a half, right? So there's a lot of things that are going to be on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
But there was that issue, and then there was the other issue, and this is really important, and I did try to hammer this theme a lot. But it got away from me. I'm just saying, in the fog of war, and it's not a linear discussion like we're having. There's 4 people involved, and 2 others that can take Alex O'Connor, the atheist, and also Dr. K. His last name is too hard to pronounce because it's an Indian name, so we all stuck with Dr. K.
Yeah.
But they were going off on tangents that I had nothing to contribute to, and partly because I didn't think it was useful or helpful to the conversation.
Yeah.
So I just was left out of a lot of that. But here's the point that I was trying to make was that purpose follows from meaning. You have to know what it's all about to begin asking the question, what is your place in the larger thing?
Yeah.
If it's not about anything, then you don't have any place in the larger thing because there is no larger thing. It is just simply subjective purpose, meaning, however you want to characterize it. You make up your own project. So if there is no God, then all that's left is finding some satisfaction. What is the utility to any activity to make me feel better?
Yeah.
Marx said that famously. This would be Karl, not Groucho, though I realize very few people know the difference between any of them now.
Yeah.
Karl Marx said that religion is the opiate of the people.
Yeah.
Which means, okay, that's the thing you take to make you feel better, right? It's your drug and whatever religion you choose is your drug of choice, but that's all it is. There's no external reality that it's tied to. And for the most part, that's the way the discussion continued to go. There's no external reality. And I wish that I had made more of that.
Yeah.
There was a point, you may remember this in the conversation. This was in the final edition. And when Alex O'Connor, the atheist, was asked by Stephen Bartlett, if somebody comes to you saying they don't feel meaning and purpose, what would you say to them? And he was somewhat speechless for a moment. And there was a certain candidness about him that I did appreciate. He said, well, it's kind of like, I don't have anything to say. I'm an atheist, man.
Yeah.
So it was almost, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he did say, well, I tell him, I guess, go to church. But that was the opiate thing.
Yeah.
If church makes you feel better.
Right.
Or take drugs.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
Psychedelic mushrooms was a part of the discussion there.
I remember.
But what it amounts to is go to church or take drugs. And then he threw in, well, read a book on philosophy of mind. Now, he threw that in because he's been curious about philosophy of mind. He's been reading things about it. He's mystified by consciousness. It can't be reduced to something physical, but he's a physicalist, so he doesn't know what to do with that. I mean, this is his own confession. He's still working on that, which was great. It was again, a candid moment there, authenticity, whatever you want to call it. And so, but it was interesting. And who's going to find meaning and purpose by reading a book on philosophy of mind? I mean, it was kind of goofy. But the point was, whatever. I don't have anything for you.
Right.
Now, that's the point where I wish I would have said, wait, I just want to pause for a minute, Alex, and just to be clear on your answer. When you are asked to give a definitive answer about the thing that we are here for hours discussing, meaning and purpose, your answer is nil.
Yeah.
Which is appropriate. Nihilism is nothingism.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
That's what that's exactly what atheists have to offer. And so the only thing that's left is whatever turns you on.
Yeah.
And here's another distinction I wish I would have worked harder at making, is when you say whatever, you mean whatever, because there are no moral distinctions left that you can make between your choices.
Yeah.
If there is no objective meaning and purpose. Morality in the objective sense is out the door. Now it's just up to whatever, whatever you want. So you could do Mother Teresa. And generally when people do the whatever thing, they always cast the alternatives in the most glowing or morally acceptable terms. But what about Drake, the slave trader, the sex slave trader?
Yeah.
What about him?
Yeah.
There's no moral distinction. Whatever turns you on. That's what it amounts to. Or to put it in more contemporary terms, you do you.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, those are the opening things that I wish I had. I almost knocked my water off here by moving my arm around, and I did that at that interview. I was off to the side, and come bam, and it right through the uprights. When I was moving around and talking with my hands. In any event, that's what I wish I would have. That's what I started out with.
Yeah.
To frame the discussion. It got cut out, though I did frame it during the conversation, and therefore there was some subsequent impact there.
Yeah.
And I had talked about Lewis's argument for desire. We are desiring to find out our purpose, our meaning, because there is a purpose and meaning to discover that's out there.
Yeah.
Just like you're thirsty, so there's water to satisfy the thirst, food for the hunger, sex for sexual desires, and et cetera. That's Lewis's argument for desire. Now, it turned out later on, this did make the cut, Alex was dismissive of that whole argument because he wrote it all off to Darwinian evolution. We survive better when we have meaning and purpose. And I'm thinking, the whole animal kingdom has no meaning and purpose that they're consciously struggling with, and they survive just fine, any event. So that was kind of what got left on the cutting room floor at the outset that I wish I had been allowed to frame for the listeners on the final analysis, the final cut.
So you talk about there's things that are happening in that room where the conversation veers, and you didn't sense that was the moment to speak up and interject.
Yeah.
My read on this, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is it seemed like Stephen Bartlett, the host, had an agenda to basically bring different ideas together and see how they sort of engage well with each other.
Yeah.
But then, Alex O'Connor and obviously Dr. K, they kind of came in with their own agendas as well. And it sort of, to me, created a bit of a mess in a format sense. Was that your read, or what's your take?
Yeah, it was a little messy, but I don't fault them in terms of their agendas, because that's why we're there.
Yeah.
We're there with a point of view that we think is sound, largely, and so we are going to contend for that in the face of alternate points of view.
Yeah.
And I think that in my case and Dr. K's, we both had more of a sense of I'm trying to think of the right word, kind of more of in a sense, missionary sense, for lack of a better word, because we believed that our views were true, and that that made a difference. There was some substance to it. There was material substance for the existential human condition, for what we feel inside about meaning and purpose and value. Mm-hmm. Now, the irony is that the atheist, he can't offer that, because atheism is the nothing view. And I'm not saying this just disparagingly, I'm doing it descriptively. It is the nihilistic view. It is the view that there is nothing. Where did everything come from? Nowhere. What's the meaning of life? Life has no meaning.
Yeah.
What direction are we going? We're not going any direction. So what does it mean to be human? Nothing. It just means to be breathing, There's no unique humanity in that sense. So in all of these big questions you ask about life, it turns out to be nothing. Yeah. Now, at least Dr. K in his Eastern mystical view can provide something. You're moving towards nirvana or something like that. Now, nirvana means extinction, and so you're basically extinguishing all your wants, desires, and there is no permanent self. It just, like the drop goes into the ocean, it disappears into the ground consciousness kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's an oversimplification, but the point here is that there's no enduring noble self that if you think of the Christian worldview, we're broken and we get repaired, and that repaired one lives on in a meaningful friendship with the creator of the universe forever.
Yeah.
So there's an answer to all the existential longings in Christianity, and in the Hindu, there's an extinction to all existential longings. But in a certain sense, it's a system. Yeah. Okay, so you're not suffering, which is a core principle of Buddhism. Suffering is gone. But in atheism, it starts with nothing and it ends with nothing. So all to make the point that the agendas that I think that Dr. K and I had were different kinds of agendas. We were proselytizing for a view that was meaningful. Now, atheists proselytize too.
Yeah.
And I think that Alex was in some measure. But proselytizing to what?
Yeah, exactly.
And this is what I wonder about, certainly to their point of view, but I wonder, why is it that atheists, and many of them, seem such a sense of mission that they have to accomplish this mission of persuading people that there is no God and the cosmos is all there is or ever was or ever will be, to quote Carl Sagan, or to quote Richard Dawkins, there is no good, no evil, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. I mean, this is not like a happy place to be.
Yeah.
So even if you say, well, they say, I'm really concerned about truth. Well, so what?
Yeah.
Why would you be? Well, because even truth doesn't have value ultimately, intrinsic value. So I don't understand what really motivates atheists, unless it's self-interest. That's part of it. That could be. They say, hey, look, I don't want all you religious folk, ruining my life or making laws that I don't agree with or whatever. But so I think all of us, at least Dr. K and I had an agenda, and I think that Bartlett's agenda was very different. He didn't have any answers.
Yeah.
Which is why, and I take this as very genuine in his case. He has a tremendous amount of personal success. Tremendous. I read in Forbes magazine that he was offered $100 million contract to buy up his enterprise. And I think something like Rogan got, and he said, no, I think I can do better on my own, which, that may be happening. He's pretty clever.
Yeah.
But he's very genuine, a nice person, very thoughtful, very curious, and carries himself really well in that environment. He's a great interviewer, as you notice, just asks a lot of questions. And he doesn't participate a lot, at least in ours. Like, here's his view, because he's not campaigning for view.
Yeah.
He is truly an agnostic, I think, on this issue, and he's just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So this is where it gave me an opportunity, that here is somebody that's reachable, where I didn't think the other two were open at all. God can do whatever he wants, obviously, but you sometimes you have to take the temperature, so to speak, of the person you're talking with.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I've been hitting hard with videos that I'm making lately on at my ministry is thinking about how to navigate these sort of difficult, choppy waters with being winsome, and then also saying true, difficult things.
Yeah.
And one of those component parts is obviously bearing in mind your audience. Who they are, what their interests are, all that stuff. Would you say in the room, if there was an audience, it was actually Stephen?
Amongst those people there, if we were no cameras rolling out, would it be the case? But my main audience in anything like that is going to be the listeners. Yeah. And the other people are a foil for the listeners. My conviction is, look, if somebody goes in print on a worldview, they're not going to change. Now, there are exceptions to this. However, it's very difficult to write about atheism for 5-10 years or whatever. That's not the case in Alex. He's only 26 years old and he's never written a book, though he is working on a book on atheism. So he said. But when you unprint, it's hard to change your mind. So my thinking is not that I'm going to change them. I'm thinking about the people who are listening over our shoulders, and who are on the fence and are listening for a sound way of thinking about it. Yeah. And this is what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to speak to them. Now, I think that Stephen was in more of that category. Some people think that Alex I actually had many people tell me that they thought Alex was moving closer to becoming a Christian, or almost a Christian. This is what they said. Mm-hmm. I think they're completely mistaken on that.
Agreed.
But based on my interaction with him, and he actually said during the interview, he said, a lot of people think that, a lot of Christians think that because I'm nice to them.
Yeah.
I know the way he put it. And certainly when you might have seen, or others might have seen, the John Lennox conversation there in Cambridge that he had with him. And he was very cordial with the eminent John Lennox. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't quite as cordial with me. And I guess I wasn't quite as old as John Lennox, but nevertheless, he was coming after me fairly aggressively on a couple of different points, which is okay. This is what we do.
Yeah.
But he did say that, he implied that their perception was not accurate, and that he's not getting closer to be a Christian. No, he is open-minded on certain things he's not resolved yet. He does say, and accurately, that the resurrection is the key to Christianity. Well, I would say it is a sine qua non of that, without which, if you take resurrection out, you have no Christianity. But there's a number of sine qua nons in Christianity, and that would be, the resurrection is just one of them. The deity of Christ is another, for example.
Yeah.
The fallenness of man, true moral guilt, man made in the image of God, beauty and brokenness of man. And so these are all part of it. But he identifies that as and he said he thinks there is some historical evidence for it, but he has questions about it. So that was a nod in our direction, so to speak. Mm. But he wasn't nodding towards me at all. He wasn't conceding anything with me, as it turned out. So, and I think, in a sense, somewhat uncharitably, maybe we'll get into some of this, but that's part of the gamesmanship of this circumstance, that I don't encourage Christians to engage in at that level. But there is a maneuvering and an attempt to demonstrate that another person's view that you think is false and that matters is bad.
Yeah.
You want to make it look as bad as it is. And so I don't really fault him for that. It's just the way it works.
Well, so I'm glad you brought this up, because this is what I wanted to ask you was you when things got sassy, I don't know what the right word is, when things got spicy,
there
you go. You did not back up. You did not cower. You handled yourself well. Mm. Now, you let Alex steamroll you a bit, but also you push back. But you did it without ever losing your cool. And I thought that probably matters more in the takeaway of the listener than the actual sort of substantive clash. Mm-hmm. And so again, this is one of the things that I'm really trying to talk about with my audience is how do we do that? So could you bring us into your mindset? What's going on in your mind when you're looking Alex in the eye?
The equanimity, the calmer demeanor is something that comes with practice. I've not always been this way, and I still, in some circumstances, get a little testy. And so I have to, and by the way, these things ought to translate into all areas of your life. I've become less testy with my daughters and with my wife, my family environment, because it's not virtuous. And I'm practicing in my engagements with other people to be virtuous in a challenging environment, and hoping that this is a character change. It is not just a trick. Okay, if you do it this way, then it sounds better. And then you could be a jerk somewhere else. I'm just trying not to be a jerk anywhere, kind of thing. But it does have persuasive power if you are self-controlled. Yeah. If you manage yourself. Now, Proverbs is filled with recommendations along this line. And it's good just to go through this, not speaking so soon, just pausing a little bit sometimes, especially if somebody offers a challenge. Now, he who opens his mouth comes to ruin, kind of thing. You got to be careful about what you say. And if you're really, I've seen people who do what we do, and they just get really feisty, and they're just jumping ready to get in. Yep. And I understand sometimes you have to. Now, in the case you're talking about, Alex was pushing on a particular issue. He's talking about the fall, the nature of the fall, animal suffering before the fall, and how do you comfort someone, say, for example, who has a daughter who's dying of cancer, and the way he put it was, and you're going to tell him that thousands or millions of years ago, 2 people ate a fruit, and that's why she's dying of cancer. So
meanwhile, I have nothing to offer, but I'm just going to focus on you.
Yes, right. Right. And see, this is where I did get some of those in, and this is where my memory, it doesn't serve me well, because of things that I actually said, some that made it on a deal, and some that I wish I had said. So but one of the best things, most important things about this, since this is a kind of a casual tutorial on these things, is being able to review these things afterwards. So in the future, you're ready with something. There are times I was ready, and when you're prepared, this goes to the being calm. When you're prepared, it's easier. When you know how you're going to deal with a certain kind of challenge, it's easier. So I asked people, how many people like to take tests? Nobody raised their hand, about 3. I said, I know why you do. Okay, next question. How many people like to take tests when you know the answers? Everybody's hand goes up, and that's 3 people. Those are the people who are studied, and they know the answers. Yeah. My hand always went up, because I don't have any trouble. I studied, kind of thing. So the same thing is true in preparation for these kinds of things. If you have an idea of the kinds of things that are going to come up, you're ready with a response, and so you can hopefully you will execute calmly because you know what you want to say. You're not caught like a deer in the headlights. Now, this is another thing that came up. And I had actually reviewed this with my own team. We just talked a little bit. We'd seen some other videos, some other apologists with Alex O'Connor. Yeah, thank you. And he throws this out, catches it by surprise, and they're deer in the headlights. Right. Well, this does not play well. Even if there is an answer, the way the audience responds is the Christian got caught, and they get bested in that moment. Okay. And so if somebody raises an issue that catches you by surprise, you don't do that during the headlights. You got to discipline yourself not to look that way. And what you can do is just beg off. You say, well, I haven't thought completely about that. I'm going to have to chew on that a little bit. Yeah. Now, that is in the tactics book. There is a tactic. There's a tactical maneuver where I teach how that's done, but it can be done very quickly. Yeah. And I actually did that with the issue of animal suffering before the fall, and whether it was pre-hominid creatures before Adam and Eve were human beings, and because he was using that against the point that I was making, brought that up. What about this? What about that? What about that? And a lot of people haven't thought what about it, and even if they thought what about it, they don't even know what about it. Yeah. In other words, they're difficult. They're unusual circumstances that aren't really clear, and maybe there's multiple answers. But if you do that, then you look confused. Yeah. And then, the atheist got the Christian confused. The atheist's right, the Christian's wrong. It's kind of the dynamic, the calculus in people's minds. So I just begged off on it. I said, I haven't worked all that out myself. That has 2 advantages. First of all, it shows I'm not caught by surprise without something to say. Yeah. I'm not intimidated by the question I can't answer. And I can't answer every question. Yeah. And so there's I guess people would take that a little bit as humility. I don't know, and that works in my favor. But the fact is, we all can't answer. None of us can answer all the questions. Yeah. So that's just a little maneuver. Now, what I thought about afterwards, and when he made the comment. So this is how post-mortems. Yeah. Maybe that's not the best word to use. Afterwards analysis, debrief, there you go, debriefs are really helpful, and you think through them, and then in your own mind, you practice what you should have said or would have liked to have said. So if this ever comes up to me again, and he says, so you mean 2 people ate this fruit, and now this woman's child is dying, and that's going to comfort her? Yeah. And my response is, I wouldn't tell that to that woman to comfort her. What I'm trying to do is give the big picture, but I want to point out what you just did. In December 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Yeah. 2 days later, we declared war on the Japanese, and immediately Adolf Hitler did one of the stupidest things he'd ever done. He declared war on the United States, a massive giant that he couldn't touch. and it initiated our industrial might. And 4 years later, Germany was rubble. Mm-hmm. The strategic air bombing program had no more cities to hit. There was nothing to blow up. In other words, one man made one decision that affected the lives of millions and millions of people that had nothing to do with that decision.
Yeah.
We know about this dynamic all the time. And so that would be my way of explaining. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. There is nothing unusual about our first parents acting in such a way that broke the world. Yeah. I have an explanation for a broken world, by the way. In your mind, the world's not even broken, and everybody else knows that it is. Yeah. So so now you see how, and I did make some of those points, but the Adolf Hitler point would have been a really good one, because it really does make the point, which is a common sense point.
Yeah, that's right.
That people make decisions that hurt other people, even the other people that are not involved and are not guilty. They still get hurt by it.
Yeah.
And that's what it means to live in a broken world. So in that one fell swoop, I can retrieve what looked like a weakness, and then say, no, it's not only have I got an answer, but this answer everybody understands. Yeah. Because we face it all day long. Now I might have said, and see, this was where I'd have to judge the temperature of the conversation. And so this is another level of assessment that in those circumstances are always going on in my mind. Mm-hmm. I have the strategic element that I talked about, the tactical back and forth, and I'm trying not to use like fighting terms here, but in the punch by punch, the blow by blow, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, but there's also this larger issue. I think you called it framing. We talked about this once before, and I'm not sure if that's the thing I'm thinking about is best understood that way, but that's another element. But there's a lot of thought about how aggressive should you be in this circumstance? Should you interrupt in this conversation to get your point in? All this positioning. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. I'm going to write that down because I don't want to forget it. This positioning thing. So I'm with that question mark in mind, I might have said, and Alex, you characterize the fall of man and the Christian worldview in the most uncharitable way you possibly could. Mm-hmm. And you know better. You studied theology and philosophy at Cambridge.
Yeah.
And this is all you have to say about it?
Yeah.
So that would have been more aggressive, obviously. Yeah. And in some circumstances, that might have been over the top. Yeah. But notice how I delivered also. It was a straightforward, hold your feet to the fire, man to man. It wasn't caustic. I'm not yelling. I'm calling a spade, and I want the audience to see what just happened. And that is called narrating the argument, where you step back a little bit and you say, hey, by the way, folks, here, did you see what just took place? Yeah. I don't want you to miss that.
This is, so in formal debate terms, especially when you're thinking about getting on stage, which basically I would take Diary of a CEO as a form of a stage.
Yes, of course.
This is what's called laying a framework for the audience, which is basically telling the story of how to think about what they're listening to in the moment.
Would you distinguish that from your strategic approach? Would you say, or is that something different?
It's a strategy. It absolutely is. And it's fundamental because now this is sort of the unspoken rule of debates, is whoever lays a better framework typically wins. Yeah. That is, if the audience adopts your framework over your opponent's framework, they're with you. Yeah. Because you're doing what you just pointed out. Did you hear that, audience? Yeah. Look at what Alex just did, and Alex is doing the same thing back. So that is incredibly important.
There's also this give and take between the frameworks where he's in that case, he was asking questions about my framework and he was trying to make it look foolish. Yeah. And then my rejoinder would be to try to make it look good and his to look foolish, which not for the sake of looking foolish and winning, because what we're talking about here is eternal things. We're talking about objective truth, the nature of reality. Yeah. Which it's almost like a medical discussion. We want to know what the right answer is regarding these diseases so people can get healed. We're not just having a debate just for the sake of, beating each other up.
Yeah, that's right. You know, you've been doing this now for decades, in the apologetics trenches, so to speak, for a while. And in my opinion, and I know for a lot of my audience, you're a master at it. You're one of the names that immediately comes to mind in terms of this particular thing: apologetics, winsomeness, stand to reason. Just surveying the landscape of your experience over those decades, what have you learned about people in general over time? Anything that stands out to you? Have they become more defensive maybe over the years?
That's a good question. I'm pausing here a little bit. I haven't really thought about that yet.
Yeah.
Deflecting. No, I'm pausing because I want to offer something thoughtful. And because a lot of times when there are questions, they're kind of, the answers turn out to be multifaceted. On the one hand, human beings are still human beings. Doesn't matter when they lived or where they lived, kind of thing. And for a long time, people saying, "Oh, the young people, they don't care about truth and reason and rationality." I said, "Really? Well, ask them why. What are they going to do? They're going to give you all the reasons why their own new view is true." So it's built in. You can't get away from that. So I think that given the fallenness of man, people have always resisted changing their minds about things that are really important. And part of the time you have these plausibility structures. They've looked at the world in a certain kind of way, the framing thing maybe you mentioned, for so long that for Christians to suggest something about Christianity, it just seems so implausible. Jesus being the only way. Are you kidding me? I actually saw a video that was to that effect. You just see this little clip of the guys going, "Oh, I'm not even going there. That's so stupid."
Yeah.
But of course, it's not plausible because it doesn't understand the story. If somebody said chemotherapy being the only way, well, that may not be the correct answer for your thing, but it's the kind of thing that's the way it works.
Yeah.
Medicine. So there's a lot of plausibility structures. People are locked into these things. But generally speaking, maybe in a broader sense, you have people don't change their minds on important things quickly. Okay, so this is something that I've realized. This has deeply influenced the way I do evangelism because my emphasis now, especially in the Street Smarts book, which follows the tactics book, I mentioned a little bit in tactics, but I have a whole chapter in Street Smarts on gardening. And the fact is, you're not going to have a harvest unless you have a season of gardening. No duh. That's not profound. No, but see, some of these things, we don't see how they connect. It's certainly true in agriculture, but it's also true in evangelism.
Yeah.
And any person listening who became a Christian, maybe as a young adult or later, if they just reflect on their own journey, they're going to realize that there was a period of time of consideration. Maybe no way for me, definitely no way. And then, never thought about that. Maybe. And then finally coming to the point of being convinced that Christianity was actually true. And given that, if our evangelism techniques are to kind of start cold and then try to swing for the fences, that it's like, I'm trying to think of a metaphor, but you have to warm up people a little bit to ideas.
Yeah.
And you're only one. If you think in the garden and gardeners, there can be lots of gardeners, right? Yeah. And I think that's the way it is in evangelism. Before there can be a harvest, there has to be a season of gardening, and sowing and reaping is another way of putting it. But there's work. And then I've noticed that when the fruit is ripe, it's easy to harvest.
Yeah.
Or the way I put it, it just drops into the basket. Most of the people that I know, and I take a poll every time I do this teaching, most of the people that I encounter on this, had not become Christians through someone challenging them to receive Christ as Lord and Savior, pray to receive Christ, there's nothing wrong with that, or an altar call. Which is nothing wrong with that. But we think of those as the ways people come to Christ, but it turns out that isn't the way people come to Christ. They come to Christ alone. In most cases, alone. 70% is my average. 70%. And in my case, when my brother Mark started talking to me again this one night in my apartment in 1973 about Jesus, I told him, Mark, I have already decided I want to become a Christian.
Yeah.
He tells me that what I said is I already am a Christian. But in neither case did Mark harvest me, though he was the gardener. I harvested myself.
Yeah.
I mean, after a fashion, we know the Holy Spirit did that.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who have no spiritual birthdays, no particular date they can remember where they became a Christian.
That's me.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So you have you harvested yourself kind of thing. Now, so this all goes to this broader point that you'd asked about, what I'd learned, and that people don't change their mind quickly. And so we should be comfortable with doing a little here, a little there, a little here, a little there. You know, I call this putting a stone in people's shoe. Yeah. Lowering the bar, and the game plan, the tactical game plan that I talk about in tactics and in street smarts are a means to accomplish that end. But the mentality is just slowing down, listening a lot, asking a lot of questions, letting people think about the things that we're introducing them to. I don't know if Alex O'Connor, if anything I said to Alex got him thinking. I don't suspect he heard anything new. I'm sure I have no reason to think that Dr. K got thinking about anything I said. And I'm just making a subjective analysis based on the responses that I heard. But it might be the case in that conversation that Stephen was thinking, I wished I could have a conversation just me and Stephen for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And talk back and forth. And there were a couple of opportunities for us just to do a one-way thing when he asked me some specific questions. So anyway, that's a huge thing that I noticed. People are people. People are made in the image of God. That means they do reason. They do think about things. They come to conclusions, but they don't always use their reason well. We have predispositions because we're fallen to go a certain direction. We don't like to change our mind when we're comfortable in what we believe, especially when changing our mind makes things uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like you got to bend your knee.
Yeah, that's right.
And follow instead of lead. It's not you do you anymore.
Yeah.
No, that's anathema. Yeah. You know, that's I don't want to be my authentic self. I want to be better than my authentic self.
Yeah.
I want to be virtuous. I want to be good. I want to reflect the character of Christ, you know.
You know, you say something, you remind me of, so the way that I think about this when I meet people, especially non-believers, is that they're on a journey. I don't know what that journey is when I meet them initially, but they're definitely on a journey because salvation is a journey, then the gospel, then they keep on their journey, and that's the sanctification process. But I don't know what that is. And so I usually try to ask, and I'm sure you would agree, diagnostic questions to determine who I'm dealing with. But also, to me, it's just a matter of me asking, where are you in this journey? Mm-hmm. Am I thinking about that in the right way?
Yeah, the tactical game plan is a series of, at least the tactic that is the game plan. There's a lot of other tactics in the book. Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. But the first section is the game plan, and it's asking questions. And the first couple of questions fit in with what you just described. So the first question is, what do you mean by that? And the second one is, how did you come to that conclusion? And simply put, you're trying to get, or it's some variation. You know, there's all kinds of variations. People say, well, it's stupid to believe in God. What's stupid about it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what do you mean by that? Well, then I want more precision from them.
Yeah.
What it is, I could say, no, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. No, this is not going anywhere. You know,
right?
You know, we had plenty of practice when we were about 7 years old to do that. You know, but hopefully we've gotten out of that. And this question then helps to get more information that allows you to find out more about where they're at, which is the point that you are making. Yeah. Not only in their what they believe, but why they believe it. What are the reasons for it? Now, what I found, it was really interesting about this, Nate, is, and here we got to have a 60s alert here, but when you ask people questions about their views, instead of just reacting to what they say, you ask for more clarification. You get what I call a Simon and Garfunkel moment. Remember those guys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're still alive, but they're very, very old. But they wrote a song in 1966 called The Sounds of Silence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was a beautiful song. But that's what you get. You ask a question of their view and the reason for it, and you get dead air. They don't know how to explain it. Sometimes they'll just repeat themselves. Well, everything's relative. What do you mean everything's relative? I mean, everything's relative. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I heard that the first time. I'm just not sure what it is that you mean when you say that everything's relative.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of, those basic questions do so much in conversation and get to the heart of your point. You're listening and finding out more from the other person. But sometimes I know people wonder, why are you, if you're evangelizing, you want to be telling them your view, not just be finding out their. Why are you asking so many questions about their view? And for two reasons. First, I want to understand it, because if you misunderstand a view and then you attack the misunderstanding, that's just bad thinking. It's called a straw man argument, and it's bad manners. You're not taking the view seriously. Okay, so I don't want to commit that. But not only do I want them to understand that, I want them to understand their own view.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they don't understand their own view. And when I'm asking a question, it forces them to think more carefully about it, and then they start wondering about the legitimacy of their own view. I'll give you one quick example. Many years ago, I was at a Ligonier conference, and we were invited to present our wares. There were cassette tapes at the time. It tells you how long ago that was. Yeah. Whoa, back in the Stone Age. And a gentleman came up to the table, and he announced to me, and I suspect it was his wife and adult daughter who were standing behind him that encouraged him to do this. And he announced to me that he was pro-life himself personally. He was personally against abortion, but he didn't think it was right for us to not allow other people to have it. Okay. Oops. People should be allowed to make their own decisions. Now, this is called the modified pro-choice position. Right. And every modified position is always pro-choice. It just turns out that way.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to know what I thought of that. Now, I could have explained it to him, but instead I took a different bent. I asked a question. But the first one was a clarification question. I said, so you're personally against abortion? Yeah, I would never have one. I would not be, I'm personally against it, he says. Why? That's the question. Why are you personally against abortion? And he said, well, I think abortion kills an innocent human being. That's why I could never be promoting it. But we can't push our views on other people. So I said, let me see if that's just one, that was one clarification question, but it was all I needed.
Right.
Because he didn't see his own view. And so I said to him, let me read your view back to you, and you tell me what you think of it.
Yeah.
I said, you actually believe that abortion kills an innocent human child, and you think it's okay for other people to do that. He said, well, when you put it that way. I said, put it what way? That's your view.
Yeah, he put it that way.
Yeah, he put it that way.
Yeah.
I said, if it's not your view, maybe I misunderstood. You're free to correct me, but it was his view. I just taken the spin off of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of politicians have that particular view, and they get away with it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is his wife and his adult daughter behind were going, yes. So he got more than he expected. But notice it wasn't really very difficult.
Yeah.
I had insight into the problem, but I used a question to help him to see it, and it came right out of his own mouth. I didn't really have to do it. I just clarified. I took the spin off.
Yeah. You may have started to already answer this question, but maybe you could say a little bit more. And let me also back up a little bit. Like, I'm surveying the landscape right now. I'm having deja vu because I actually spoke to you.
All over again?
I'm having, because you and I, a few years ago, maybe it was 5 years ago or something, I sat in your studio at Stand to Reason, and I basically asked you where we are right now in culture. And I'm basically going to do it again. So just forewarning. But I'm surveying the landscape. Charlie Kirk is brutally murdered on television for everyone to see. And now the sorts of reactions from the various groups of people in this society are heightened. They're elevated. People are angry. And here we are as Christians, we're trying to navigate this, shine the light of the gospel, but also it's almost like, I feel like, ramp down the temperature in culture. And there's just a lot of confusion about how to do it. And so this is kind of where this question comes from is it possible to still have common ground with your opponent who is a non-believer and find a way to have a difficult conversation from there? Or do you think it's not possible?
Well, there's a lot going on in your question. The simple answer is I think it's possible with some people. So what has happened for up until about maybe 3 years ago, maybe 2, it's hard to put a time on it exactly, there was increasing hostility towards the Christian worldview. And it was interesting, the left talks about speaking truth to power, but the left was in power, and they weren't concerned about truth. It's so ironic, So this did not bode well for us. And then some things began to change. Obviously, things on political level began to change earlier this year, and changed very, very rapidly. Okay. And there were voices like Charlie Kirk's that were speaking common sense to the world, but were doing it in a tactically shrewd and sound way, in the best sense of the word, because he was using the kind of approach that we have been talking about. Frank Turek was a mentor of Charlie's. He had a number of people that mentored him, but Frank mentored him a lot in the tactical approach, using questions and the like. He was very good at it. His graciousness was really amazing. So I think that it's now, the other things that were happening, as you see, Justin Brierley wrote a book about the something like the amazing revival or surprising revival in belief in God. Stephen Meyer wrote the rebirth of the God hypothesis, and so you see these books coming out that are bearing testimony to a change at the upper levels of culture about worldviews. But then at other levels, I would say more, I'm trying to think, more on the vulgar side. And the vulgar just means like the common man, but it also means like the uncouth people too, depending. And I'm thinking of hardcore leftists now that aren't thinking, they're just reacting, and they want their way. And I don't think that, for the most part, leftism is principled. I think it is leftist in its political ideology, and that's something very particular. It's statism, it's communism is what it amounts to. And again, I'm just describing, I'm not disparaging. But in terms of the rhetoric changes all the time. Right to privacy, and then they out people who they don't like, the docking or whatever, all this other stuff, So when it comes to the actual maneuvering and stuff on these ideas, it's anything goes to get our way. Now that's not a Christian view, and the conservatives versus the leftists have been characteristically conservative, and so they have restrained themselves. So when George Floyd got killed in 2020, I mean, the major cities were burning for months. There was not a single act of hostility or rioting or anything like that, public act, after Charlie Kirk was killed. And I know that because I never saw any news on it. Well, news doesn't report everything. They would have reported that, you guarantee. And so nothing. So that shows a difference. But there was a galvanizing. And this is what you were kind of pointing. The groups moved this way. Now, there are people in the middle, and the people in the middle also got galvanized to the right, in my view, not to the left, because they are seeing what's going on and what these people are doing. And now there is a large-scale championing of violence against the right. There was just a couple days ago, over the weekend, the No Kings thing in New York. I was in Seattle over the weekend. There was one big thing there. And the whole No Kings thing doesn't even make any sense at all to me because there's nothing about like that's taking place at all. Nevertheless, it's rhetorical language that moves people, and they keep chanting it over and over. But in these demonstrations, there were explicit appeals to assassination. You saw it on the placards and stuff that people were, and even in the language. That's pretty scary.
Yeah.
Here's my concern about the right. So far, things have been pretty mellow, but now every once in a while you see a thing where what's being called the woke right, a kind of retaliation in kind, canceling.
Yeah.
In ways that are not appropriate. Hey, look, if a company wants to cancel their superstar because it says something stupid on TV, that's their business. Yeah. It's not the FCC's job to get into that, because we don't want to repeat those errors. But there does seem to be a bit of emotion in that direction. We do not want to act in unvirtuous ways that those that we have criticized in the past acted. It isn't going to be now it's your ox going to get gored because we get the power. We still want to do what's right. On balance, I think that's taken place, but I do see concerns in certain areas.
Yeah.
But a word about that middle. When Charlie Kirk got murdered on the 20th of September, the 10th of September, and on the 11th, 9/11, I was speaking at Kennesaw State in Atlanta, and I had dinner with the leadership of the campus community, the spiritual leadership, Crew and Ratio Christie. And they said there's been an incredible openness on campus. Now, this is before Charlie got shot. Incredible openness. It's easy to talk to people about spiritual things. These kids are hungry. And this reflects some things that were going on the higher level that Justin Brierley wrote about in his book, that those who are kind of heavy-duty new atheist types and in that broader camp, many of them, 2 of those are dead, those players. The other 2 are still atheists, Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris.
Yeah.
Daniel Dennett and Christopher Hitchens are gone. But there's a whole bunch of other people that are changing their mind because they realize that the atheistic worldview does not fit with their deepest values and their deepest sense of reality. And so you have people like Tom Holland, the British historian, or I always have a hard time remember this other fella. He's on everywhere now. He calls himself an atheist Christian. He's British, and he does political commentary, and especially the West is dying and it's destroying itself. I'll think of his name in a few minutes, but when I say it, you'll recognize it because he's all over. He's a very bright guy, and probably mid-40s or something like that, and he also is acknowledging he's an atheist, but he realizes that everything he believes that's important and valuable is not consistent with his worldview, but rather a Christian worldview.
Yeah,
and so there are more and more people that are seeing that on the higher level, and now just in the last year or so, and I think really launched this thing, it really gave a boost to it, is what happened to Charlie. Because now the couple, people are seeing, first of all, the ugliness of the left more than ever before. They see a guy like Charlie, and more people are watching him than ever did before because they just thought he's a political guy. Well, he's a fabulous Christian apologist, and he was gracious. He would set the microphone down after he'd said his thing, and the other person right there, he gives them why does he set it down? So they can talk.
Yeah, that's right.
And when he got shot, he was listening.
Yeah, that's right.
He wasn't talking. So that commends his views to them, and his views are Christian. And the views that he holds politically are things that flow from his Christian view of reality. Now, some people may disagree with that, whether it's the sound way to go or not, but nevertheless, it is in virtue of his Christianity that he was moving in the direction, and this is the kind of thing that got him shot. And, of course, all these that are saying yay, yay, are saying the same thing, yay, yay, about the assassination, are saying, and others like him ought to be killed too, other Christians as well.
Yeah.
And this happened more and more. But the people in the middle are the Holy Spirit is doing something. It's so clear.
Yeah.
Kennesaw State, but I've talked to many other churches, and they keep saying our youth groups are filling up, our churches are filling up, people are coming to things. And we had our own reality student apologetics conference in Seattle. Every seat sold out to youth. Yeah. Middle schoolers and high schoolers are our target. And every seat sold out 3 weeks before the event. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to Minneapolis for the same event. That church holds 4,100. It's the biggest church in the state. Yeah. We usually hit about 38, which is, for all intents and purposes, full.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's a chance now because of this thrust, we could sell out all the seats there. It was the first full weekend of November. If anybody's interested, it is in striking distance there.
Yeah.
RealityApologetics.com. Kind of a shameless plug there. But what I'm pointing out is this surge of interest, especially with young people. And that surge is happening. So I think this is the middle. The left is getting further left. The right is either standing firm or getting a little bit extreme.
Yeah.
And that concerns me. The so-called woke right, and that there's infighting that's going on, with the MAGA crowd and with the Charlie Kirk TPUSA crowd and stuff like that. I hate that because we have bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, that's right.
But nevertheless, it is what it is. A big thing is happening that I think the Holy Spirit is doing, and I don't know if this be another Jesus movement like when I became a Christian 52 years ago.
Yeah.
But it just seems like this middle crowd is moving more spiritually to the right. I'm saying spiritually because I don't want people to think it's moving politically right, maybe, but that's not what I'm talking about. That's not my concern. Yeah. My concern is that they are seeing their need, and they're more open to hearing the truth of the gospel. Frank Turek has even been talking about this because he's in a lot of campuses.
Yeah.
Shift.
Let me try to put words to this so that I understand what I'm hearing you say, because I threw a sort of a big question at you, but what I'm hearing you say is that if there is common ground right now for Christians to, again, navigate these kind of choppy waters, say difficult, true things, but also engage people who don't agree with them at all, and also are largely angry, right? Maybe it's on the basis of values. You talk about the middle ground shifting. Was it on the basis of values that they recognized in themselves that they shared with others?
I don't know if I put it that way. And to be clear, I don't know that there's common ground on the extreme. I don't know that these are people you get to talk to. Now, it doesn't mean they can't have a change of mind, but I think that's going to be an insertion of the Spirit, like immediately, directly, not mediately through a Christian. We have these conversations that get them thinking. We put a stone in their shoe or whatever. But I think that people who are on the extremes, there are going to be exceptions to this, but I don't think they're interested in talking yet. Now, here's something that I thought about with Charlie Kirk, though, because that really was a force multiplier, in this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think somebody asked me the question a couple of weeks ago, which is always hard for me to answer. What do I do with apathetic young people? And my answer characteristically is you can't do much.
Yeah.
Because they're apathetic.
Yeah.
Okay, so why are they apathetic? And this is what just occurred to me. Because they think they'll live forever. They think they'll live forever. Simon and Garfunkel back there in the early 70s or late 60s had this song called Old Friends, talking about old people. And there's a line in there, how terribly strange to be 70. But when you're 17, 70, you can't count that high. I passed 75 years ago.
Yeah.
So I have a much more robust understanding of my mortality. When you're young, you don't have that. And so you can live footloose and fancy-free, thinking it's all going to go on forever, and you're not going to ever reap the bitter fruit of your lifestyle or death. And then Charlie Kirk, 31 years old, gets snuffed out like that.
Yeah.
And I think that this probably brought to mind to a lot of people the fragility of life, and that, they could go any day too. Not likely, but maybe, like Charlie did. there's a accident, a bunch of high school kids get killed in an auto accident, 6 of them die all at once, and it just changes everybody at the school.
Yeah.
So I think that was the force multiplier that helped get the attention of younger people to make them more interested in spiritual things. I could be mistaken on that. I'm just making this observation. I think that's a factor.
No, it's good. Yeah, I appreciate that insight. I know from my sort of vantage point, that's what I felt.
Yeah.
And I'm not 17 by any stretch
anymore. Still have my age, so
several
still
decades
a young buck
removed. But I did feel that stirring, and I get the sense that a lot of people did. There was something on top of that as well. And this is why I mentioned value. Maybe value is not the right word, but it's this idea of not only Charlie getting shot so horrifically, but it's almost like the First Amendment got shot. But that, to me, that's a value, Yes. And so for those people that also recognize, it is important that we should be talking and we should set the microphone down and listening. Maybe that's also one of those factors.
Yeah, but on the left, though, especially with young people, they don't characteristically hold that value. The numbers are very high, and maybe 50, maybe 60% that do not believe in free speech. They believe in free speech for them because they believe their views are correct.
Yeah.
But they think other people's views are not just correct, but they're dangerous. And I think some views are dangerous, but in virtue of their perceived danger being on the left, they feel they have the justifiable liberty to use violence to silence them. And there's something that's going on here with more on a philosophical level with critical theory that now has kind of made its way into the culture of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Critical theory, one component of it is, and the broad thing with critical theory is these two groups. So you have the oppressor and the oppressed. All right, it's called the social binary, and so the oppressed, people of color, and the oppressors, which are characteristically white male Christians people, and this is the way they characterize the struggle of culture and the struggle of history. Oppression has changed its definition in this motif, where oppression used to be if you were black, you couldn't sit in the front of the bus. You had to go to the back, Rosa Parks. You couldn't drink in that fountain. You couldn't belong to this club, this kind of thing. Or certain groups of people would be killed, like Jews were in the Third Reich. And so that was oppression where there was physical means of force. Well, with critical theory, ideas took the form of oppression, were characterized as oppression. So it's called now oppression by ideology. So if a person in the past, say, was a homosexual, like in Muslim countries, and gets executed, okay, well, that's oppression. Jailed, whatever. But now, if you just think homosexuality is wrong, that's an idea that is taken as oppression. So it's oppression by ideology, and it's also oppression by language. If you say that, when you speak that, you are oppressing me. I don't know if you notice the language. It's so weird. What is it? What do they say? It's like you have made me disappear, or you think I'm non-existent, or
I don't exist.
What is that word they use? But it's all, you just pay attention to the rhetoric. Okay, if you say that gender dysphoria and subsequent transgender behavior, ideation, or whatever is wrong, then it's like you are erasing me. Maybe that's the word? You're erasing me. How would they ever think that they're getting erased? But this is how they characterize it. But erasure is a move into non-existence. Notice how the language works. So if my idea or my language is itself oppressive, that erases an individual. Well, that's an act of violence against them. And if this violence is being perpetrated against them, they have the right to return with physical violence.
That's right.
As an act of self-defense. So these ideas are coming together. This is what they're taught in college. So this is the critical theory overview, and then it represents itself like a DEI is the antidote. here's how we can fix this: social justice expressed in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we see this is a disaster because we're putting people in positions of responsibility that don't have the qualifications. It's not merit.
Yeah.
It's color.
Right.
It's crazy. And by the way, apart from any question about genuine oppressiveness in the history of America, this is a dumb solution.
Yeah.
It's not a solution. It turns out to be reverse racism or reverse prejudice. See, that's the word. In the 60s, I was almost 18 years old when Martin Luther King was killed, murdered.
Yeah.
And so that whole movement was very live to me, but that and real to me. But this whole thing now has just turned everything on its head. It's just the opposite. Everything is opposite, even though it's supposedly for racial justice. It wasn't the kind of thing Martin Luther King would ever do. So it's crazy. It's hard to thread through some of this stuff, but there is great opportunity. And you don't have to be a philosopher to take advantage of the great opportunity. I just added that stuff so people have a little insight of what is actually going on. Well, Antifa side and the violence of language, even silence is violence. Remember that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface here too, because we're sort of hopscotching over categories here of postmodernism and, Derrida and Gramsci. And anyway, I have two questions, and the last question is an advice question. But you basically raised this, and so now I'm thinking, right? I don't have an answer to this. Yeah. I really don't know, and I'm trying to think through this. But if our belief system, if our convictions as Christians are an existential threat to, well, not only an existential threat, the number one existential threat to people who have linked their identity to something that we disagree with, how can we possibly engage that?
Well, it's not an existential threat. It only feels like that to them because of the way they've defined it. Okay, so like you're erasing me. Yeah. And that's the way they get an existential threat out of it. But if we comport ourselves with as good ambassadors for Christ, with truth and grace, Jesus was full of truth and grace, right? Isn't that John chapter 1? With truth and grace, then I think we have an antidote to that. So we can speak the truth in love. It's kind of a way of putting it it's almost a little bit trite because you speak the truth in love. Well, we said this so many times it loses its meaning. But nevertheless, I think that's the answer, that we can be firm and truthful, but we can have good manners and grace in the way we engage people and try to understand. And all of those things that stand to reason we talk about regarding me being a good ambassador. I think that can breach it. Now, I know that there's a little bit of a movement on now in Christian circles, like we shouldn't always be so nice, and maybe this is some of the woke right group. I don't know, but Jesus wasn't always nice. I said, yeah, that's true. Yeah, but we want to be really careful that we're not using our kind of liberty or that rationale as a cloak for being mean-spirited. Yeah, that's right. And what I say in the tactics talk, and it's in the book, I think, if anybody gets mad, we lose. So if I'm in a discussion with somebody and they get mad at me, well, I'm not going to be, they're not being persuaded. I'm not going to be effective in persuading them. Yeah. If I get mad at them, it's even worse. Yeah, that's right. Now, you can't always control their being mad, but you can control, I think, work on it at us and the way we comport ourselves. Yeah. And so I would say that's the antidote. The antidote is truth with love. We call it ambassador, an accurately informed mind, knowledge. Wisdom is an artful method, and character is an attractive manner. If we pursue that model, which I think is biblically informed, then we have the best chance of making a difference with a hostile crowd. Now, that may mean that we get hurt, and even physically. like happened with Charlie. That is rare in this country. It's very rare that political or journalist figures get murdered. Mm-hmm. It happens in Europe, happens in South America and Central America all the time, but it doesn't happen here. But now you have a whole group that seem to be championing that kind of issue, and I'm not sure. It'll be interesting what happens in the midterms. The only reason I bring that up, and they're coming, well, it's a year away, but it usually midterms just characteristically go against the present party in power. There's a shift back. But there's been so much bad coming from the left, so much anger and hostility. I think and I'm not campaigning at all here, I'm just reflecting. I think what might happen is the rest of the culture is going to show in the voting booth at the polls what they think of this other direction. I think that happened a year ago, almost about a year ago. And everybody said no to this crazy DEI, open border leftism. That was the choice of the electorate, both in popular vote and electoral college, which also raises the question: what's all this complaint about kingship? No more kings, because this was exactly how the process was supposed to work. Yeah. But the people said something. The people of the nation said, this is not the direction we want to go. Now things have just intensified. Yeah. Ironically, they've intensified since then, and more, not just polarization, but galvanization. People went to the extremes and then got stuck there, especially the left. Especially the left, because I guess those on the right were just really happy for some change in leadership and change in, of course, the policies that are in play. But the left got really, really, really hardened. Now, that's a losing strategy, and it seems, politically. Yeah. And on a national basis, and maybe there'll be another referendum against that strategy coming up in a year. And that might make a difference. I don't know. Yeah. If there is a referendum against it, it's not only the people that would normally vote that way, but a lot of other people are just changing because they say, this is just too crazy. I don't want to be associated with this. I don't want my vote to reflect this, whatever. So I do, I'm hopeful that things are going to change, but the polarization and the galvanized nature of the left especially, it's very dangerous right now. Yeah. And we just have to be careful we do not act in kind. Yeah. Okay, great. You've just set me up for the last question. All right. Because my audience, and I know yours, they know, they're smarter than the average Christian bear, praise the Lord. They know what a lot of these answers are, and they're on their journey in education with regard to apologetics. But we need to strike that balance of character and knowledge. And especially now when things are heated, how can any advice for somebody who wants to really hold on to some of those biblical injunctions, season your words with salt so you know how you ought to answer each person. Exactly. When you're correcting somebody, do it with gentleness and respect. Don't answer reviling with reviling. Right. Like, can you help them hold on to and continue to develop that character aspect of being an apologist? Well, I think you did a pretty good job just then, frankly. Those are verses that I try to keep in mind, remind myself of. I don't always think of verses when I'm in the midst of something, but I am consciously aware of how I'm coming across. I mean, I try to be consciously aware of that. These things, we're talking about character development now, and character is something that develops. It's developed in the crossfire of life, so to speak, in the crossfire of these circumstances. My earliest discipler, Craig, he could tell you stories of how I shed a whole lot more heat than light in the early days. So even for me, it's been a process. And I would say if our Christian brothers and sisters can make a mental commitment to be nicer, to take a deep breath and relax and ask questions, and I keep beating that horse. I want to use the phrase like a broken record, but that's another one that's anachronistic. I mean, it's gone. Who knows what that means anymore? But like over and over and over again, when you use questions, just like you're using here in our conversation, okay, there's no pressure on you at all.
Yeah,
I'm doing all the heavy lifting because you're asking me. You're directing the conversation the way you want to go. But even if we were in a more pressured circumstance, the questions have a way of managing the conversation, and especially keeping the Christian calm. Now, Alex O'Connor was very calm, I would say, in that discussion we brought it up earlier in the show, this podcast. But he was asking a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. He's very, very good at that. Getting clarification, but not just clarification. He was using his questions to set me up for a fall.
Yeah.
Actually, that's kind of Columbo number 3, the third use of the questions. You're using questions to make a point.
Yeah.
But he was coming after my view, and so I had to be very careful at how I was responding. But he was very relaxed because he was in the driver's seat with the questions. And so the same thing here, when you ask questions, the tension level goes down. Mm. You make it more conversational. You're not obliged to answer everything or know everything, but when you're asking questions, questions keep you safe. Yeah. Because you're not promoting your view by making statements from which the other person can ask you questions.
Yeah.
And now you're on the defensive. And when we're on the defensive, it's easy to get defensive.
Yeah.
So I would say using a tactical approach, using questions, trying to think. I just want to season my words with salt. Actually, the phrase before that, let your speech always be with grace.
Yeah.
So be gracious.
Yeah.
Be gracious. Be nice.
Yeah.
That's the simple way to put it. What a concept.
That's right.
It is a discipline. It does not come naturally to most people, and it didn't come naturally to me. But as people watch me engage, like you did on DOAC, Diary of a CEO, I was able to kind of maintain my calm, and I was able to do that because I practice.
Yeah,
I try to act that way, to be gracious for the virtue of it before God, and because it's effective.
Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, a lot of what we talked about seems to intersect with 2 of your most recent books, which is Street Smarts, but obviously Story of Reality. And so I just want to make sure before we close that you have an opportunity to just tell my audience about anything at all that you're working on or any events or anything like that. Any plugs?
Yeah, well, let me think. We have our final reality for the students this fall. We have 3 in the fall, 3 in the spring. And it's going to be at Minneapolis, like the first full week, like the 8th and 9th or whatever that is, of Minneapolis of November.
Yeah.
So Friday night and all day Saturday. Now, it just came off. I could still hear the music ringing in my ear. A couple days ago in Seattle, it was unbelievable. It was magnificent.
Yeah.
But we had 1,600 students there. We are going to be pushing 4,000 students at Grace Church Eden Prairie. So if people want to make the trip, you can fly out, make a road trip if you're in the adjacent states. We usually have 15 states represented, some foreign countries, for anyone we have around the country. We'll have one in Dallas, we'll have one in Philly, and we'll have one in Southern California in the spring. But the website is realityapologetics.com. The other thing is, you mentioned the Story of Reality. Actually, I guess I could say this here, that we did a landing page for DOAC so that people who are interested could get a complimentary chapter.
Okay.
Just to get a taste of it. Well, I'll tell you what that is. Even if they didn't see the DOAC, they could still go to this landing page. And the landing page is str.org. That would be the Stand to Reason website. str.org/DOAC.
Okay.
Diary of CEO, DOAC. And it's going to presume that you already saw the deal, whatever, but the DOAC thing, like you were coming in. But that's a place where your people can get a hold of that copy. And hopefully you'll find in that complimentary chapter, only take you 15 minutes to read. It's called The Rescue. We gave it a different title for the PDF, but How God Repairs a Broken World, or something like that. But hopefully you'll buy the whole book, because that's just a taster. First one's free, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you get the whole thing, because that's going to lay a foundation for the entire Christian worldview, and maybe a way people had never seen it before. And it's not because it's particularly fancy, clever. It's just it's very ordinary in a way. Yeah. And you read the book. It just people say, why haven't nobody taught me this before? It's just so simple, but it holds the whole story from the beginning to the end together in one narrative, so you get a feel for how it all works. The subtitle is How the World Began, How it Ends, and everything important that happens in between.
Yeah. I've read the book multiple times, and I encourage everybody watching to go avail yourself of the free chapter and, get the book, because it's going to bless you as well.
And we've been talking about Tactics quite a bit, and Tactics is the first book to which Street Smarts is a sequel. But Street Smarts is also a tactical book that can be read as a standalone piece too.
And now Tactics has a 10th anniversary edition, is it?
Of Tactics? Yeah. Well, that was 5 years ago now, 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
But it's called the 10th anniversary edition. Yeah.
Yeah.
2019 is when we did that one. But
Greg, you have been not only an inspiration to me, but you were there in the very beginning of my formation as a Christian. And so I just can't overstate how much of an influence you've been on me. I know that's true of my audience and a lot of people all around the world. That's great. I just wanted to thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, I'm proud of you, brother. I'm glad for what you're doing, and I'm glad to be on your show. Thanks.
Thank you.